kind of so default, right? That people need to learn a bit the basic terminology there, right? So because as companies started moving to the Kubernetes ecosystem, right? Earlier, there were not enough abstraction which were done earlier, right? So I remember when I was giving trainings in 2017, 18 timeframe, right, to my clients, then there was nothing like building something on top of Kubernetes. Of course, there were some like toy stuff, but they were not kind of something ready for production as a platform. So at that point of time, because companies want to move to Kubernetes, they have to teach their developers about the terminologies of Kubernetes terms like pod deployments and all those things, right? So everybody has to kind of go through the training. But now we see that okay, some companies are releasing that let's not give kubectl access to our end users or developers, right? Let them just understand the concept and let them just stay in their flow on a in a very simpler way. So that is what is there. So that is what this particular chapter covers about. That what is the what do I mean by the the abstraction here, right? So let me just get to the next one. Where is it? I think I'm moving fast. Right. Yeah, here. Now what's happening? GitOps, this is done. Something is wrong, I think. 1 minute. Yeah, now I think should be okay. Yeah, okay. Um, yeah, so I have my notes on a different iPad what I have here. So I'll just highlight whatever I think is important here. Otherwise, remaining thing is what I mentioned already. Um, Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, right? That for the approach of no developer exposure to be successful, there must be sufficient capacity in the platform team. So what does it mean is that when we are building such platform and we don't want developer not to have exposure, right? What happened? Not sure. Yeah. Uh, Yes, this is kind of the same thing which I've talked about earlier, right? That the platform team should build the platform such that the developer need not to bother about what is happening behind, right? And that is what this particular highlighted point, which I kind of read through earlier. Um, then Then this book talks about the ways by which we can kind of enable this abstractions and at what level we can do. So one of it is the self-service onboarding. What this talks about is when we are going to set up the environment. Okay. Yeah. So one way to do it is basically you basically leave it up to the teams itself, right? So now, for example, if you have some experts in your company who knows Kubernetes in and out, but then what we can also do is we can um, give the complete self-service onboarding to the end users or the developers. What does it mean that what does it mean that the platform teams will be responsible for provisioning and configuring the cluster for all the teams, they need them, right? Um, and they'll probably help them responsible for at least helping deployment of the applications on those clusters. Now, the idea is that as the teams are going to deploy their applications, now we can have different tenancy setup for the teams there, right? One way to do it is we kind of create one cluster for the team, and then they kind of handle it, and then we kind of set up some kind of logging, monitoring, and other stuff there. That's one way of doing it. Or as you kind of scale and go next, you can also see that okay, we can also set up by different namespaces there, right? So rather than having one cluster per team, we can look at deploying the tenants in namespaces, and then configure different policies, network policy and quota, so that the resources are being shared optimally between the teams. So that is the point what was mentioned there in this particular section. And then the main thing is here that for the environment what we're going to set up, then as we know that some of these things are critical to set up as we are putting up multi-tenants environments on the same cluster, namespaces, RBAC, network policies, and other stuff. So we already covered all of these things in the previous chapter, so I not kind of dive into in these terminology, but I am assuming that all of you are aware of this. But if you're not, then please let me know. We can kind of talk about them. But all of these things are covered in the previous chapters. Um, what can also happen at a later point of time is rather than basically kind of doing these things like individual namespaces and so on. What we can also do is we can also create our own CRDs, as you can see here, and we are creating a something called as kind team. So rather, when we are trying to onboard our new team there, rather than creating a namespace, setting up RBAC policy, setting up quotas and everything, right? What we can do is we can create a CRD or like custom resources called team here. So of course, somebody has to build this particular custom resource, but the idea is that once we have this particular resource created, it would basically do all those things behind the scene. So by just saying that I want to have the kind team created, it would kind of do the relevant settings and deploy the namespace for you and the other stuff there. So that way we can basically also set up the environment for our end users or the different teams there. Okay. So the next point here is the spectrum of abstraction. So if you look at this particular image here, right, you can see here the different companies over time or even right now, they can choose to have abstractions at um, different what you call say um, or spectrum, whatever the word they have used, as kind of looks like a right word here. So you can see here one is no abstraction, which means the end user get access to the entire kubectl or kubectl thing. Then next what we can do is we can templatize the different um, application. So for example, while deploying our application, we may require deployment object, namespace, stateful set, PV, PVCs, config maps, secrets, and so on. So other than just creating a kind of a say a fixed solution in which we have different YAML files, what we can do is we can deploy our applications with the tools like Helm and Customize. So I assume that all of you know about Helm at least. So Helm is a package manager for Kubernetes. So if I want to deploy an application, I can say Helm install WordPress, for example, right? And it would install WordPress for me. Now, I think that example goes further in the chapter, or let's actually go there. So if I look at the Helm, right, this is how we templatize the different things. Like for example, our application port, service port, what we are doing, or the service type, which is load balancer here. So now what happens in the Helm packages, we have the we don't hard code our values for any application. So for example, think about you have an environment of, let's say, Nginx, right, or any other one, right, as well. For example, for Nginx, I'll just take a simple example. Um, let's say you are deploying this Nginx program on your local environment and then on the cloud, right? So on the local environment, you may say that, okay, I want to have the service type of node port, but while deploying on production, I want to have the service type of um, a load balancer. So typically what we know that in our service.yml file, we write something like service.type is equal to node port or load balancer there. So if I create a YML file, um, then and if I hard code that, right, then it'll become hard coded throughout the life cycle of my project, right? But if I templatize it, which I can update on the fly. So for example, here, if I use the Helm package manager, I can, rather than basically saying in my YML file, in this Helm they have values.yml file. In this we have service.type load balancer. So when I update or when I apply the Helm chart, I would say Helm install a given package. And as I say that, the default parameter would be taken up. But I can also overwrite on the fly when I'm deploying it. I can say Helm install package and then say -c, and this particular change service.type is node port. Or I can update the YML file here, the values.yml file. There are different ways by which we can configure this. So if we templatize it, we are not hard coding it. So that is the second level of kind of abstraction talked about earlier, that we move from the no abstraction to templating tool like Helm. Now with the Helm, of course, you need to kind of understand or learn a bit of this templating language per se. But then there's one more tool called Customize, and this tool can basically make much more simpler. So basically, we can still have the same YML file, but I can configure for different configure in different ways. So, for example, again the same thing, right? For deploying in production, deploying in local, I can choose to have the same YML file, but by applying a different way of templatizing it per se, I can deploy my app in different ways. So a subtle difference between Helm and Kubernetes, Helm and Customize. Let's just not uh, dig deep into further, but you can find the information available on the internet about them. But talking about abstraction, this is the second level of it. The third level of it, for example, let's say we build internal custom resources to abstract native types but still leverage Kubernetes APIs and paradigms. So like the way we saw that if I just say that, okay, deploy a team object, it does the things for you, but still working through the Kubernetes API thing. So we are in that flow. That's perfectly fine. And the last one is basically if you want to completely decouple the what you call say or completely remove the Kubernetes um, what you call say way of doing things right from the end users, then we can go towards like a pass offering. Like I believe you would have used something like a Heroku earlier and so on, right? Where we can simply say something deploy, they get deployed, right? So we kind of build some kind of layer on top of Kubernetes, and then that takes care of the part. So we are completely hiding details of Kubernetes from the end users. Correct? That is what this last one means. So there was a question. Um, a great point, however, how do you decide the borderline between what to make self-served and what not to? So the question is what to make self-serve. See, now, so when you're kind of going to build a platform, so I believe you would not go whether half you want to make it self-serve and half you want to make it um, like manually available, right? So typically, if I'm looking at the workflow of a developer, Milab, for you, is that I would abstract out everything entire in the platform. So, for example, I believe you would have heard about all of these platforms which are coming like Backstage, Facets Cloud, and other stuff, right? They're they're hiding all of these details of creating a namespace, creating the other things from you, right? Even the complete infra from the behind the scene, right? So either you go the platform wise, or you don't go um, uh, the kind of a say a half, or you do kind of like this is the way, right? What you're trying to achieve in this, right? So based on this spectrum, you would kind of reside there, right? So now deploying the application can be done by Helm, or you can say that I want to completely hide and I want to stay at the end. So if you look at the end, what we want is we don't want the developers to kind of bother what is happening behind. That's one. And then what was the end goal is to completely hide Kubernetes from the end users. They don't even bother what's happening there. So I believe the question not about what to make self-serve, kind of more of like um, how much or how much. I mean, in at which spectrum you want to use kind of go here. That is what I would say. Louis' question is when using a multi-tenant Kubernetes cluster where you have different dev teams, different namespaces deployment, do you recommend using single ingress controller per dev team? Okay, that depends, Louis. I think so. Yeah, so it's better to actually have. I mean, if you have very large teams, I would suggest that you have one ingress controller per namespace there. But if you don't have a big enough team, right, even single one can suffice for you. And again, of course, if you are getting billed for per API calls and other stuff, having one ingress controller would per namespace would make much more sense. Hope that makes sense. Okay. So next one, the point is here, the command line tooling here. So let me just take a look. Yeah. So it basically talks about primarily whether you want to allow user access of the kubectl or kubectl or not. Whether you want to kind of give that level of access to the end user. Um, So what happens in that case is if you are giving that access, you need to kind of set up authentication for everybody, which we talked about earlier. Uh, like then again, for the people who are not familiar with Kubernetes or kubectl on a regular basis, they may find difficult to look at the output of it and so on. So it can become very challenging for the end user. So that, but you can of course open up the raw access to the and to the end users there. That is what this particular topic was there. Then I talked about this already, abstraction through templating. So rather than deploying each object by different YAML file, we basically create a kind of a say a package in which we have templates available, and then we just update something what we want to update. Otherwise, for the end user who are completely to Kubernetes and they don't care about, we can tell developers or not developers, our end user or customer, for example, right? Run this command, helm install ingress, whatever, right? And get installed, right? Upgrade, helm upgrade this package. So that can be a very simple workflow which we can build for our end customers. This is how the template look like. As you can see, there is no hard coding here, correct? So what we are doing, like in this case, as you can see here, it is saying type values dot service dot type. So if this is defined, use that. Otherwise, we have to pick up something else. That's what I think this means. So that is how we can templatize the entire stuff, and that can help us there. So Helm is one way of doing things, and then similarly, the customize is another tool. So in the customized tool, we don't touch the original YMLs what we have, but we have a layer on top of it through which we can update our preferences there. Right? And then abstracting Kubernetes primitives. This is typically the CRDs. So rather than kind of going and creating the objects, like for example, let's say you're deploying a MySQL, for example, right? Or in this case, something has been given, whatever this, right? Um, Pinterest service, right? Uh, so whatever the service is there, right? So what we are saying in this case is this is the custom object, and now this custom object, let's say what I want is if I deploy this object, or maybe I'll just simplify it further. So let's say you have a requirement to deploy a database of MySQL in your environment, right? And that MySQL is being deployed in a similar way across the organization. That's the second part. And what is the configuration of that? For example, when I say deploy MySQL as a cluster database, which I'm saying, it should deploy three copies, three replicas of my MySQL. It should configure the backup of it automatically. It should open up on a given port or whatever the configuration is there, right? So it is more than the default configuration what you want to have. So what I can do is I can build a custom object saying that when I say kubectl deploy database hyphen whatever x, my company, whatever it is, right? So I'm now giving a custom name to it. And when I deploy that object, it will create that three-pod setup, the respective backup configuration, other stuff there. So like in this case, when I'm saying deploy the service, it is going to create this particular whatever the role is there, the load balancer type is there, then the pod template is here with the container name and so on, right? So now I'm just going to create the custom objects, and that would kind of take care of the things. So I'm abstracting out the details from the underlying whatever I want to deploy three pods and whatever, right? So I'm not saying that go, hey team, go and deploy three pods. Three pods will be configured together like a stateful set or whatever, right? And then we should configure backup of it and all those things, right? So I'm just saying that every team just apply this YAML and this would take care of it, right? And that is how what does this particular section mean by that? Um, Yeah. Then the last point, what is mentioned in this particular is about making Kubernetes invisible. That was what I was saying at the beginning, right? That you abstract it such that people even don't care about what is behind, right? I would simply say, like, if you have run the command Cloud Foundry CF push or Heroku command, Heroku command and push, right? Whatever that is, right? And it takes care of it. So it will look at your source code. It will find what the source code type is. It would build a Docker file of it. Then it would kind of build an image, push the image, and then deploy the application through that. So we can even do at that level itself. So that is kind of making Kubernetes invisible. So in that case, my end user or my developers, right, who's deploying the applications, they are not even bothered about what is kubectl, what is all that, right? They just have a simple workflow. If I do this thing, my app get deployed, and as an output of it, I may get what you call say this is the endpoint of my application. This is the endpoint where I can find the logging. This is the endpoint where I can find the metrics of it and all that stuff, right? So all those things would be very much easily available to the end users, and that is where what you call say uh, people are targeting it, right? But the way Kubernetes has been used, I believe, so there are two kind of views you have in the industry, right? One would say that okay, we should do like this only, right? That where it is completely hidden, right? But by doing that, what may happen is there may be a friction point because we may not understand the same terms. So, for example, DevOps or SRE team, they would work in Kubernetes terms, a developer would not understand, and then there can be a communication gap. Or other way to look at is we would just tell our developers just enough of Kubernetes terms. What is a pod, what is a deployment, and how you deploy the application in Kubernetes. And though we abstract out the remaining part, but at least the terminology need to be clear, correct? That is another way of people are looking into it. I'll kind of belong to the second one where I say that okay, developer need to know about basics, what Kubernetes is, how do you deploy the applications, though you may still use some of the company's build platform, right? So that is what is there. And then, yeah, they talked about something called as Waypoint from HashiCorp. That also does something similar. Like as you can see, it's kind of building a pack or whatever, but somebody has to learn about their language to build this particular Waypoint or HCL, right? Through which you can write this part. So I'm not sure how much Waypoint is being used, but that's one thing is that okay, you don't have developers to know about Kubernetes, but they still need to kind of understand what this build pack is all about, and through which you can write the manifest to deploy the application on Kubernetes per se. So that is what is in this particular chapter. And why I ran this particular chapter very fast because we already covered the remaining stuff on the previous chapter of this book in great detail actually. So if you are new and if you did not knew some terms, you can of course ask right away and we can point you. Or there are recordings available for all the sessions which you can always go and watch, right? So with that, we come to the end of this particular book. And as you know, that this we kind of started this book in August last year, right? And it's almost around 8 months, right? 7 to 8 months. We took this much time to finish this book, right? Where the question is, how can I access the recordings? I'll give the recording link on the chat, or if somebody have it handy, please put on the chat right away. Um, so we'll do it, Marshall, in some time. Yeah. And then there is, of course, this Slack channel on the CNCF, what we have for the book club. So, of course, join that, and there you can always ask questions if you have any. Okay. So, I just want to, any questions so far? Any questions we have here for this book? Okay. If not, then I just want to quickly kind of get a bit of feedback. I know that not a lot of people are kind of have been for the last few sessions, right? But if you have any feedback, I mean, if you've been part of this journey of this book, if you want to share any feedback, any learnings, what has happened throughout, you can maybe share. That would be helpful. And then we'll look for the next topic of heading the book. Yeah, the next one. Anybody want to share the feedback if you have been part of at least 5+ sessions?
Yeah, this is Ram Kumar. Yeah, actually, this is a good experience for me. Actually, I can say like after a long period, I'm continuously into continuous learning. Okay,
Right,
because
yeah.
that was really good. Like no, and each week, and I should appreciate you and Abdul and Rajesh who took special efforts on delivering the content. Right, you are not waiting for any other people. Like just you get into it and started presenting the things. Really appreciate you. If I missed any names, sorry for that. Okay, I'm following up this for the recent time, and I noticed three of you are regularly putting your efforts on sharing the content and your experience, and other volunteers who are also part of this event did a great job. A lot of interesting questions, and it was really a very good learning experience for me after a long time. Thank you, all of you.
Great. Good to have Ramkumar. Good to hear from you, Ramkumar. I know that you have been part of almost all the meetings what we did, right? So, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that is good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, Francisco, please go ahead.
Yeah, I cannot agree more what has said before Ramu Kamar. So I appreciate all the effort that you have already done, deliver the content. Unfortunately, in my personal case, has been a little bit difficult to follow all the sessions just because I had all the commitments, but I appreciate it. Indeed, what I'm looking forward is what is the next book. in order to
Yes,
catch up
correct.
from the beginning. So I apologize myself in that regards, because for me it has been a little bit difficult when I joined this club. The book was almost already done, because where I started almost in the middle of the book, and it was difficult to catch up. In the other club that I joined in on Friday, they
Mhm.
started a new fresh book. So I'm doing my best to join on the session, and I expected to myself. However, all the people that already deliver the content, that led all the sessions, I appreciate the effort to deliver the content, and sometimes give more advice related to the expertise and the background that they have. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so with that, let's kind of look at what is the next book which we can pick it up, right? So there was one discussion we had, I mean, last week, as at least there, right? So as we know that this book has taken a good amount of time, and this book, I believe, has built the right foundation of Kubernetes, right? Of course, it did not kind of touched upon all the basics like that. I believe you would be knowing already, but this book has kind of given a very broad perspective, right? And of course, as we deliver the content, as myself, Abdul, and others have gone through the book, though sometimes it kind of repetition of something which we already knew, but I am pretty sure that in every chapter there was something new to learn, right? Even though we knew some of the stuff beforehand. Um, yeah. Right, Abdul, if that's right, right? Um,
Yes, yes, totally agreed, man.
So yeah, whatever, at least something was new there. So now the what thought we had last time, right? Whatever the next we'll pick it up, right? That book need to be hands-on kind of a say we do more rather than theory, because of course we have spent time and all good. And now the foundation has already been built. Let's try to do some hands-on stuff. That is the thought which we had in the last two sessions, what we thought is there. And we kind of put down one book which was uh, Argo CD in Action, I believe. That was, let me just get that particular book from there. Mm,
Yeah, I think it's Argo CD in practice.
correct.
Yeah,
So there is, yeah, that's one book. Can you put the link on the chat, please?
just doing that.
I'll kind of get one more book which I think is interesting. I think which also relate to the recent times what everybody is doing, right? Um, which is of course what's the hottest thing in the market, and anybody guess?
I know.
Anybody want to guess what is the hottest in the market? I believe all of you would know, but this is the next one. I'll share the link. I'll actually reshare my screen.